Welcome to Money Misfits. I am your host, Professor Heath, and this episode is an in-detention episode, and it's all about your first credit card. I just got done talking to Hannah and Zion about their uses of credit cards. They're both currently using, or they are both currently an authorized user on their parents' accounts, and both are getting ready to transition into their first full-blown real credit card. Okay, so a lot of things came up in that episode, and I sort of want to hit some of the highlights in this in-detention method as quickly as I can. So the first thing I want to talk about are some of the myths that came up in that conversation with Zion and Hannah. The first one was credit cards are imaginary money. Hannah was saying very clearly that a credit card is not imaginary money. I think she was saying that when she first started using it, it seemed like it was imaginary money, right? But in reality, at the end of every month, we have to make the payment in full. Okay, so it is definitely not imaginary money. The other thing that came up, another myth, is that we want to use our credit cards to buy really expensive things, and then maybe use our debit cards to buy, the nonsense stuff like Starbucks coffee or DoorDash. In reality, we want to do the opposite. Zion was saying that he actually uses his credit card to buy really expensive things, thinking that he's establishing good credit that way, when in reality, it's the exact opposite. There is a thing that we've been talking about that's called the utilization rate. And a utilization rate is the percentage of the maximum amount that you are using. For instance, if your credit limit is 1,000 and your balance is 300, then your utilization rate is 30%. Okay. If you use your credit card and you buy something that is $800 and that shows up on your bill, if your credit limit is 1,000 and your outstanding amount is 800, your utilization rate in that instance is 80%. The higher the utilization rate, the lower your credit score. So we really want to back off from using the credit card to buy expensive things and actually use it to buy inexpensive things so that we can keep our utilization rate down between 10 and 30%. And we'll talk about how to do that in a second. The third myth that came up is that I'll remember to pay it later, right? No problem. I'll just remember to pay it. My son actually forgot to make his car payment very recently. And we always talk about, hey, you have a car payment coming up. It's got to be made by a certain date. And unfortunately, he and I both missed that due date. And so I was telling them, it's crazy that we missed this, because I preach all the time that in order to not miss a payment, we can set up auto pay. And I'm going to talk about that again in a second as well. Another myth that come up, I don't know that it came up in our episode with Zion and Hannah, but it comes up a lot, and it has to do with an annual fee, right? Is an annual fee charged by your credit card company, is that a scam? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Here's the deal. If your credit card is providing you points, either through cash back or travel rewards, and those points are really valuable to you, you use them a lot, you get a lot of use out of these points. And let's just say the value that you're getting from using your credit card is in the $400 or $500 range, but you are paying a $100 annual fee, you're making out in that situation. I agree you're paying $100 and that does suck, but some specific cards provide so much value to you specifically that it makes sense to pay the annual fee. And again, if you're not getting the benefit, or if you can get the same benefit from a card that doesn't have an annual fee, then by all means, go with the card without the annual fee. But if the only card is providing specific benefits that you can't get anywhere else, sometimes that annual fee makes sense. Okay. And then the last myth, hey, I'll pay my bill eventually, right? At some point, I'll just pay off the credit card. That is not a good way to go about doing things. We don't want to pay it off eventually. We want to pay it off in full at the end of every month. The moment we begin to carry a balance from one month to another, that is when we get into trouble. That is when we start paying interest, and we are running the risk of snowballing into something incredibly expensive and very detrimental to our ability to build wealth. So we're never eventually paying it off. I'm good. We're fucking paying it off in full at the end of every month. Okay, here are the rules that we want to start following. I just talked about the myths. Now I want to talk about the really healthy habits that we want to employ month after month. The first one has to do with the utilization rate that I just spoke about. We were saying the utilization rate, that's the difference between your balance and your credit limit. Okay. And it's not the balance by the due date, it's your balance on the statement date. Okay. Two different things. Your statement date is the period of time that you are being charged for. And the statement date, whatever your balance is on your statement date, is what is reported to the credit agencies. Okay. So what we want to make sure we do is we want to make sure that our utilization rate at the statement date is between 10 and 30%, no higher than 30%, and realistically, no lower than 10%. The closer we are to 10%, the higher our credit score. The closer we are to 30% or passing 30%, we begin to lower our credit score. So here's the trick. If you receive your credit card bill, you want to open it up and you want to look for two dates. You want to look for your statement date and then your due date. Your statement date will usually be sometime, just prior to the end of the month. In fact, I don't even want to tell you that. Your statement date is your fucking statement date. You want to open your credit card and look for them. And then what you want to do is you want to set up auto payment so that you're paying your credit card before your statement date. You want to make sure that you're managing that utilization rate. You want to get it down to as close to 10% as possible. Then you let your credit card company report your credit balance to the reporting agencies in order to establish your credit score. And then you pay the bill off in full at the due date or by the due date. Those are the two dates. You want to make sure you're at 10% to 30% as of the statement date. And then you want to make sure that you're zero by the due date. Okay. That is definitely rule number one. Okay. Second one is don't pay the full amount by the due date. You want to, again, get used to paying your balance, at least a substantial portion of it, by the statement date or the closing date, not the due date. Rule 3, and I think we've already talked about, you want to automate everything. The more automatic this stuff becomes, the less likely you are to make mistakes or miss a payment. Like I said, my son did not have auto payment, and he and I are very conscious about when things are due, but sometimes life just happens. And unfortunately, we skip the date or we miss the date. And more often than not, it's not going to kill you if you're still within 0 to 30 days of the actual due date, but that's not something that you want to play games with. And so creating auto payment, using your checking account to just automatically make payments on certain days of the month is absolutely huge. And you can most definitely set auto payment, the full credit card amount, by the due date. And that is a huge, huge pro move. Rule number 4, we want to keep old cards open. A lot of things go into our credit score, and we will get to that in another episode. But your utilization rate, that is something that factors into your credit score. And then another factor that goes into your credit score has to do with the length of time you've had credit with a particular bank. So the longer you've had credit with some bank, the more advantageous that is for your credit score. So we don't want to close good standing accounts. We want to keep those open to establish long histories of credit use. Rule 5, only get a card that actually does something for you. Okay. So again, we don't want to just use a credit card to use a credit card. we obviously want to establish good credit by using our credit card, but at some point, we establish really good credit. And then if I have really good credit, does it make sense to ever use the credit card again? And absolutely it does, because credit card companies offer us points to use or rewards to use our credit cards, right? So we can earn cash back in some instances, or maybe we can earn travel rewards, whatever it is. When we use our credit cards responsibly, we can accumulate points. And as long as we're paying off the bill in full at the end of every month, we're never paying the associated interest. And so using a card that's right for us is really, really important. As a first-time card holder, okay, some of the cards that might actually be really good for us could be a student card, right? A student card is meant to be like a first card for somebody who's just getting started. And they usually have lower balances and lower credit limits, and that's for the bank to protect itself. But a student credit card is a great first credit card. Another really good first credit card is a secured card. And a secured card is an instance where you provide the bank an upfront payment of, say, $500. And then the bank extends credit to you equal to that 500. So you can then, moving forward, you can use your credit card. You can use it consistent with the way we were saying. If your credit limit is 500 and you want to keep your utilization rate down to 10%, then you would charge $50 on your card. And you would do this for 6 months, maybe a year. And then at the end of this 6 month or a year, you can then transition into a unsecured card, like the more traditional cards, so that you can presumably get your money back from your secured card. So anyway, a secured card and a student credit card are good ways to get started if you don't have access to the traditional cards that you see pretty much everywhere. Okay, subscription traps. I can't tell you how many episodes we have been talking about subscription traps, right? It came up in the episode with Omid and Sophia and Michael. It came up with Arifa and Diana. It also came up with just recently with Hannah and Zion. Both Hannah and Zion were basically saying that they are aware of subscriptions that they are not using that continue to get deducted. The subscription fee gets deducted from their, or charged, I should say, to their credit cards. I can't remember what it was that Hannah was using, but it was like a Shrag or Shag. It was the school stuff, Quizlet. That's what it was. She is paying for Quizlet. However, she never uses Quizlet. Zion had a very similar situation. He might have also had been even using Quizlet. I myself just recently noticed, right? So again, backing up, I switched my debit cards. I got a new debit card. The expiration date on the old one expired. So the bank issued me a new one, meaning every single account that I had opened and was paying for with my old debit card, they have started emailing me, telling me, hey, you have to update your card because the old card, the expiration date expired. And I am getting fucking emails from these companies that I forgot I was paying for. When I first started teaching, literally like 8 or 9 years ago, I opened up an account with Wix and created a website that I no longer use, but I've been paying annual fees for that website that I no longer use for I don't know how long. Okay. So subscriptions, we want to be religious in the way that we review our credit card statements and make sure we are removing the subscriptions we are not using. They are like silent killers. They are slow bleeds. Companies by design make them small amounts, something that is painful, but not too painful. And then they also make it difficult to cancel. We've covered that in multiple episodes. But the subscription trap is real, and we really want to make sure we pay attention to it. The other issue that has come up quite often, emergency fund. Again, we want to make sure that we have a savings amount equal to at least 1 month of our anticipated spending. So if I'm spending $2,000 a month, I want to make sure that my emergency fund is $2,000, equal to 1 month of my spending. Ideally, we want to be somewhere between 3 and 6 months of our monthly spending. So if I'm spending $2,000 a month, I want to make sure that I have at least $6,000 to $12,000 set aside in an emergency fund. And that may seem unrealistic to many of you, but that's okay. You want to start slowly, or you want to start now and build up slowly, right? Maybe 250 is the amount to use. I spoke with Zion and Hannah. I presented them with some imaginary situation where they're driving their car, they're living on their own, and the car breaks down and it costs $900 to fix. And they both had a $700 emergency fund. The question I posed to them was, should they use the $700 cash emergency fund, or should they pay for the repairs with their credit card? And man, they both went with the credit card, and that is absolutely the wrong response. Not blaming them, right? They both have their reasons, but here's the deal. If you feel like a one-time thing is eating too much into your emergency fund, then that is an indication that our emergency fund is too low. So again, we always want to fall back onto our emergency fund, not the credit cards. The credit cards should always be used in a world where we are paying them off in full at the end of every month. And if it hurts you to dig into an emergency fund, it's going to hurt you even more paying interest moving forward. And again, if it hurts to dig into the emergency fund, that is a good indication that it might be too low. And then I think in the last episode, I presented a credit card starter challenge, and I definitely want to start that again, or at least address that again in this episode. So if you have a credit card and you're currently using it, start your auto pay, generate your auto pay, pay off the balance in full by the due date. And then if you can, demonstrate or create an auto pay where you're paying down the balance so that you only have a 10% to 30% utilization rate as of the date of closing or the statement date, both of the same thing. Here's a second action item. Day 2, go through your credit card statements or even your debit card statements and cancel subscriptions you are not using, okay? Third, start saving for that emergency fund. And the goal could be $250. A lot of you aren't spending a whole lot of money month to month. So the emergency fund may not have to be all that high. But again, the general rule should be you move to 3 to 6 months you're spending. Open up your credit card statement. Look for that credit card closing date or the statement date. That's another challenge. And make sure you get comfortable with that specific date and you know where to find it. And that way you can begin to play that utilization game, okay? Make one small purchase under 10%. Just keep your utilization rate somewhere around 10% just for 1 month. See if you can do it. And then pay down your balance early, right? If your due date is the 10th, make sure you pay the 5th, pay early. And then maybe, here's a pro move, log on to one of the credit reporting agencies and look for your credit score, right? We will cover credit scores in another episode, but at least for now, see if you can do it. See if you can soft check your credit score and see what your credit score is and see if there's some way that you can begin thinking about ways to increase it.